Hi there, good evening. My name is Bonnie Violet, and you have found yourself at Drag and Spirituality. This is episode 11, so our guest tonight is Syzygy. Before we get into that, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. First of all, I'd like to thank Glide for providing this space and the support to be able to put on this event in this virtual time. I would also like to thank the Glide Pride team for their support and encouragement in the process of getting this up and going. I'd also like to thank Perry, who is on tech tonight, as well as Linda Summers, who is helping us out with the Facebook comments. This is a free event, so there's no charge. However, we would love it if you feel so inclined to travel over to the Transgender Districts page. There's links at the top and the bottom, or however way you're watching it, there's going to be a link close to the video. Click on that, go to their GoFundMe page and make a contribution. If you don't know much about the Transgender District, you're welcome to also check out their page, learn a little bit more about the organization. It's the first recognized district of its kind on the globe, and it's located in the Tenderloin here in San Francisco. So check it out. Also, as a way for this experience to meet kind of a spiritual space as well as drag, you can also feel free to tip our guest throughout the event to show your gratitude for them and for them taking their time to be here today. And also feel free to submit questions throughout the night. As I see those questions, Linda Summers will share them with me and I will ask them of our guest. So thanks so much for being here tonight, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. I know I will. So our guest this evening is Syzygy. Syzygy's drag is a balancing of the feminine and the masculine, an alignment of celestial bodies, a union of opposites. Their current spiritual practice takes the form of a ritual sunset tea party drag show. In the liminal time of golden hour, a non-binary time between day and night, we can use transformation, music, and movement to open windows into a liberated queer future. This is Syzygy.
Something's happening. Hi,
Hi there. How's it going?
good. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this discussion to answer questions from the viewers at home. And yeah, I'm really grateful.
Fantastic. That video is so mesmerizing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I've definitely one of the musicians or artists that I lip sync to the most is Fleetwood Mac. That song was a digital number I made at the beginning of Shelter in Place. Um, I think after watching it, I think it has a lot to do with falling in love with the self and like feeling comfortable spending time alone. And that's something, at least for me, I'm still working on, even several months in. And yeah, it's about being interconnected um, to everyone and with everyone at all times, just here on Earth, even if we're not like physically close to each other.
Right. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And you just changed it just enough from time to time that it just, you just wanted to see what's going to happen next. It was fantastic.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
I,
Oh, I was saying too earlier too. One of the kind of tropes I've been seeing with all the digital drag shows is someone doing a duet with themselves or lip syncing to themselves or having themselves as backup dancers. I think drag is all about the self and exploration of the self and of identity. And so using technology, we have more tools to play with that idea.
and reflect it. Yeah, it's so fun to see what's been being created. Um, so I usually like to kind of get started way from the beginning. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up for you?
Yeah, so I guess in the context, I'll keep this more in the context of drag and spirituality, but I grew up in a really Catholic household. And I also grew up just outside of New York City, and I was a child actor. So I had these two really not opposing, but definitely different worlds that I was in with like going to church every Sunday and going to Sunday school. And then like maybe on Saturdays and like after school on the weekdays, I'd be like going into New York City and both of those things have a lot to do with drag now. Like looking back at like what the priests and whatnot wore at church, that's full drag. Like the robes and the big hats and um, the sort of smoke and mirrors of that is very drag. And same with like show business and like entertainment and TV and film and theater. Um, and Yeah, those definitely both have spiritual elements, but they also both have drag elements. And those two kind of worlds I grew up with as a kid definitely form my drag.
Mhm.
Um, from the day my sister and I got like the first Britney Spears CD, we would just like lip sync to that all the time. This is before I even knew what drag was. Like we would lip sync all of the songs.
Wow.
And we had three CDs that we would listen to all the time. It was like Britney Spears, ABBA Greatest Hits, and like spooky Halloween music. And those definitely inform my drag a lot too. I see different elements of those in my drag.
Right. And what was your experience with growing up Catholic? Was that something you enjoyed? Not? How was it?
Definitely not. Catholicism is um, as a whole not super queer friendly. I'm trans and I didn't know that at the time. I identify as gender queer, gender fluid, trans feminine. Like um, exploring drag has and the makeup part of it has definitely helped with that identity. But I didn't have those outlets as a kid, especially in church. Catholic Church is pretty abusive. It's kind of a cult. I mean, it is a cult. And I definitely, even as a kid, and more so now, I saw so much discrepancies between. I, I don't think Catholicism is very Christian. It's not very Christ-like. I was really into like what Jesus was the New Testament stuff is great. Old Testament, not so much. But unfortunately, both are there and both are kind of preached, um, or at least that was my experience. So um, it's ironic now because I live in a former nunnery, and
Oh,
so I live with all this like religious iconography all around me, and like there's a chapel in my house.
mm.
um, and
How is that for you?
yeah, it's good. It's interesting seeing because the space I live in now, it was a nunnery, and then it became a shelter for abused women, and
Mm.
then it became an art commune. And so like there's a confession booth like in our house. You know,
Right.
it's like it's interesting to see, and like that gets repurposed for like performance art. You know,
Mhm.
and like um, I'm grateful to see the sort of transformation of the space into a more liberated, hopefully definitely more openly queer. You know, there were definitely queer nuns living here in San Francisco, you know,
Mhm.
for the first several decades. So I don't want to erase that, but this is definitely more of an explicitly queer place, um, and a more artistic place. I would say in some senses. I think art in any form, like there's people here who do drag as well. There's lots of dancers and musicians, um, but I think any kind of art is a spiritual practice.
Yeah,
It's
I
just different. Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, that's part of why I wanted to do this series is that I think a lot of us have spirituality and we do things that lift our spirit and like do these sorts of things, but sometimes we think we're not allowed to call it spirituality or call it God
Mm,
or call it whatever. And I just think there's power in kind of claiming that and calling it that.
definitely.
Has a and so yeah, it's really interesting to see that like you guys are able to just kind of embrace that aspect of kind of being surrounded by that. A lot of churches have removed that kind of iconography in order to like make a more welcoming space sometimes for queer
Hmm.
folks and other folks.
Yeah, and definitely there were some stained glasses in the chapel that aren't there anymore, but there's still some that are still there. And
Uh-huh.
I mean, as a kid, I think Peaches Christ talked about this in their discussion for this series too, that the there's like drag in like that, the Virgin Mary with like the blue outfit, like that to me is like very drag. Um, and I think I think every religion has like some aspect of spirit, right? And then
Mhm.
lots of religions unfortunately fall into this like trap of like reproducing the hierarchies and the societies where and contexts where they are,
Right.
um,
And it
and
can,
kind of yeah,
well, it could be fairly performative.
that too, yeah,
Yeah. And in a way that
um,
might not actually be, I guess, helpful or, but it could be, right? Depending on
yeah,
relationship.
exactly. And like I don't know, you hear stories too of like religious um, organizations that are doing charitable work and work that is for the betterment of society, like having homeless shelters, but then like excluding trans women from those shelters, where it's like the Jesus who my understanding of Jesus is like Jesus would be hanging out with the trans women, the sex workers, the like people who in that society and in today's society um, faced marginalization and oppression. And so I definitely, again, I'm very grateful for like how I grew up. I don't know if it would have changed any of it, but like I definitely am more, I feel more comfortable and centered in my spirituality now. Now
Mhm.
that I don't have this idea of like, oh, there's a big man up there who's like gonna punish me if I don't pray. Like,
Right.
I think I definitely have a more nuanced understanding of it now.
For sure.
Yeah.
So after high school or after graduating, what was next for you?
So I moved to San Francisco right after I graduated from college. So this was 2014. Yeah, 2014. Um, and I was living at the time with someone who grew up here, and she like said, "Hey, I think this is a place that you would like." She was also an artist. Um, I've been making art like basically my whole life, but I didn't start doing drag until after I moved here.
Mhm.
So, and even then, I only started doing drag about 2 years ago, a little more than that. I was mostly doing physical art, like collage. Um, and I still do that from time to time, but this is drag takes a lot because you have to do all the different the hair, the makeup, the costumes, all of it. And so yeah, I moved to San Francisco without really knowing what was next, but like having come to visit here, my friend's intuition was really right, and that like this is a place I did, start to form a community here of mostly queer people, but also lots of artists and activists um, from different and shared experiences, and finding affinity and community here.
Mhm.
Um, Again, I'm definitely really grateful to be here and not in New York, especially because New York is like very overwhelming for me physically. Like I get sensory overload if there's two people having conversation in the same room. So like, taking the subway every day to like get to high school was like definitely challenging. But again, I'm grateful to have grown up there, but I'm grateful to um, be living here now, especially the aspect of being connected to nature. I think is something that's really important to me, and I didn't really discover that until um, my adult life here.
Yeah. And so was drag just kind of a natural progression with your art, or were you surprised by it?
Yeah, I've told this story before, but not I guess on here. I saw a queen. There's a queen named Mary Weiss who's
Mhm.
to me a San Francisco legend,
Yeah.
and she did a drag number with a puppet, and she did a duet. I believe the number that she did was "Enough Is Enough," but with the puppet. So she sang one part, and the puppet sang the other part. And it was kind of like a Sesame Street style character. And I've been my drag now is really inspired by like cartoons. Like I definitely consider myself like part Miss Frizzle, part uh like Wally. I'm definitely very inspired by like sci-fi fantasy cartoons. But like seeing that aspect of drag on stage was like, oh, this is something I want to do. Um, and seeing that number with Mary was kind of a turning point for me. And now I'm grateful that like I know her as a person and like have performed in the same shows as her. But I didn't think it was something I could do until I saw other people do it with the makeup. Like obviously, like I said before, I've been lip syncing with my sibling from a young age, but I didn't put the costume component together with it.
Right. We have a question from the audience from Linda. What is the difference between those two forms of art, collage and drag? Are there any similarities?
Yeah, there's definitely similarities. I noticed like I make all my own eyelashes, and that involves lots of like precise scissor work and glue.
Mhm.
I'm learning like how to style hair, and it's the same. Um, okay, cool. I'm gonna switch on my headphones because they're saying, hold on. Um,
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Um, with collage and drag, I think there's lots of similarities too with sewing. One of the things I'm working on during shelter in place is learning how to sew, so like measuring and cutting. Obviously, drag is more 3D, whereas collage is 2D. Um, but yeah, I'm definitely trying to blend those in different ways. I'm noticing this with, especially with video editing, now that so much of our drag is online. Um, Cutting and pasting video numbers is similar.
Mhm. Are you comfortable sharing a little bit about your gender identity and how that plays out with drag? Or
So yeah, I knew it was genderqueer or trans, uh, or gender fluid or gender free. I have a friend who uses the word gender free, which I really appreciate. I
Mhm.
discovered that before I started doing drag or started, putting on the makeup and putting on wigs and performing, which I think often it happens the other way, where someone starts doing drag and then they realize they might be trans.
Mhm.
Um, I had this preconceived notion that this is unfortunately a commonly held notion that like drag is inherently misogynistic, which I don't think is the case now. It definitely can be, but I was kind of on the other side, being trans and thinking, I think I read some critique of like, you know, about misogyny in drag, specifically in like mainstream drag, which at the time in 2014 was Drag Race, which I hadn't seen. And so I kind of just was like, oh, this is, you know, men perpetuating stereotypes about women being too promiscuous or too drunk or whatever. And I didn't realize that like drag is the process of like reinventing yourself or recreating yourself or creating an image of yourself that you want to share with the world or for yourself. One thing I've been spending lots of time alone, and sometimes I'll get in drag just to practice makeup, not perform, you know, not lip sync, not take photos, even just be like, okay, this is it. There is something really meditative about sitting in front of a mirror for 1 to 3 hours or however long you take, and transforming yourself. I think there's real magic in that. One of the, I guess this is kind of off topic of the gender identity, but one of the definitions of magic that I really appreciate is that magic is any symbolic action that you take with an intent. And I think lip syncing is all of those things. You know, you're using all sorts of symbols, lashes, hair, costumes and whatnot, and movement to communicate to the audience. And I can communicate a lot of things in drag performances that I don't necessarily have the words to talk about, if that makes sense, or write about, or even make a collage about. And so I am really grateful to have discovered this art form as a means of self-expression and self-exploration, which again feeds back to gender, has helped me feel more comfortable being trans.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of messaging do you have a theme of messaging, or what are some of the messaging you like to put out there with your drag?
Oh, okay. I think one of the, so I just did an 8-week Pride series for the show I host, Golden Hour, and the last show the theme was life because it's based on the colors of the rainbow flag, and we ended with red, which stands for life in the rainbow flag. And one of the things, the number I did for that show was "Don't Let the Good Life Pass You By" by Mama Cass, and that is one of the messages I kind of have to remind myself and also try to remind the audience of is, you know, enjoy the things in life. You know, be kind to other people. I think every performance I do that has a lot of meaning for and message has a really strong message for myself. Usually in the realm of like change or transformation or release or prayer even. You know, I think a lip sync can be a prayer.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your name?
Yeah, so Syzygy is one of my favorite words, probably my favorite word. It doesn't have any vowels except for Y, which is like this non-binary letter. And so again, even as a kid, before I had the vocabulary, it's like, wow, that's really cool. Like Y is both a vowel and a consonant. Like it's not either or, it's somewhere in between, and it can be one or the other. Like I thought that was really cool. And then I've always been really into outer space. Ever since I was a little kid. Again, like part of that comes from my love for Miss Frizzle, but also like I had a poster of the solar system in my room. Like was and still am a nerd when it comes to space. The Syzygy means an alignment of celestial bodies. So anytime there's a full moon, anytime there's a new moon, anytime there's an eclipse, that's a syzygy between the Earth, Sun, and the moon. Syzygy also means an alignment of opposites. So it's like kind of a leveling. It literally comes from the word like a tying together or yoking together. And then it also means like a balancing of masculine and feminine in psychological terms, which that really appealed to me too. And so pretty soon after I realized I wanted to start doing drag, I was like, oh, well, if I'm going to do drag, it's going to be that. That's going to be my name. Yeah.
So I guess, has drag always been part of your spirituality, or did that come after, before?
I'd say lip syncing has, like I said, lip syncing has always been part of my spirituality. Like I've always lip synced, ever since. Like I can sing, but I can't sing the way Fleetwood Mac can, make music, and that's, something I accept, and also like something that, um, I've been using. Music for me has been like a coping strategy and like a healing tool for my whole life. And so like for me, right before I moved to San Francisco, I was like lip syncing to Fleetwood Mac all the time. Like I had a cassette tape
Mhm.
of Rumors that I would just listen to on repeat and like, feel my feelings.
Right, right.
um, and then now drag is a huge part of my spirituality in the sense that it's when I feel the most connected to other people, like when I'm performing. Um, and I found my sense of community, like all of I think my closest friends and people I love the most dearly within the queer community are the other drag performers who I do shows with, um,
Mhm.
or like watch at shows. um, I think like I don't know if we talked about this before the stream, but I don't drink, but I definitely found my queer community at the Stud, um,
Yeah.
just performing there over the last 2 years, and really just getting to see the like wide variety of drag that happens there. That to me felt like church. And
Mhm.
then with Golden Hour, the show I host, starting in 2020, I was hosting it every Sunday. And that's a show that happens outdoors at the ocean usually. Sometimes we switch it up. Um, but it happens outdoors at sunset, and it's a tea party. So again, it's a sober space for people to gather. Um, it's an all ages show because it's at the ocean. And one of my favorite things would be, just kids who are randomly at the ocean would like be in awe of, these drag performers just
Right.
doing their numbers at the sunset. Um, and Yeah, when Shelter in Place went into effect, I stopped hosting them in person, and then started doing online shows. Which again, the last 8 Sundays before this past Sunday, I was doing that show, and that to me also kind of felt like church. It's a place for people to gather, a place where there's music. Again, I'm not serving tea at them because they're all virtual now, but that also felt like a sacrament to just like be giving people rosemary tea
Mhm.
as an offering. Um, so yeah, that
Yeah. And right now you've taken a little break, but how does the audience find out about the event?
there's a web page, an Instagram for Golden Hour. It's at Golden Hour Drag Show on Instagram.
Okay.
And I'm not really posting videos and performances from the shows as much as I was pre-Shelter Place, but all the posters for that. And Golden Hour has a Facebook page as well.
Great. And then Todd wants to hear more about Syzygy's balance of feminine and masculine and how that informs their human experience, our body, mind, and spirit.
Yeah, so about balancing the masculine and feminine, I think when I first moved to San Francisco, I knew I was trans, but I I thought the only option for me was to be a trans woman. Again,
Mhm.
I knew about non-binary gender identities, but I didn't really believe that could apply for me as well. Um, and so for me with Syzygy, it has been this is a tricky question because I think for me, I don't think gender is really real in the sense that we've been all indoctrinated into it. At least this like very Western colonialized like gender binary of like this is a man, this is a woman. These are like the power imbalances between those two. Um, Being able to do drag physically helps me feel comfortable in um, expressing myself in a more sort of stereotypical feminine way, or traditional feminine way. But then also, I love kind of subverting that. Like I know there's certain drag performers who like will highlight their Adam's apple, and sometimes I'll do that. I think for me, it's never been about um, being a man who is dressed as a woman because I've never really identified as a man. That was just sort of a label that was put on me.
Mhm.
And so for me, I've been, and especially in Shelter in Place, I've been doing more drag king makeup looks, which is very different. Like drag queen makeup is all about like, or at least lots of the techniques I've seen have been about like creating like diagonal lines, whereas with the drag king look, it's about like, you know, creating
Mhm.
sharp, um, really rigid lines. And so that's been helpful for me as far as, you know, dealing with gender dysphoria around like looking in the mirror. And I think at this point now, I mean, I think for lots of drag queens, this is drag performers, this is relatable. Taking off the makeup is the best part, just because it's not comfortable on your face. But then after doing drag for about a year and a half, I got to a point where once I took off all the makeup, I would feel more beautiful than when I put it on. Obviously, I still feel beautiful when I put on the makeup, but it's nice to have both. And so for me, this whole project of Syzygy has been about aligning both sides, even though, again, I don't think it's as simple as like one side or the other, but sort of like merging them and mixing them together.
Understood. And kind of along with that, what challenges do you face in drag as a gender fluid being, if any?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm grateful to be in San Francisco where there's so many other gender fluid, genderqueer, non-binary drag performers. Um, I think the most challenging thing for any non-binary person is being misgendered, being gendered one way or the other. Um, in drag, I get misgendered as she, and that doesn't really, I don't want to say it doesn't affect me as much. Again, I think over the years, as I've gotten to better know who I am, I'm less affected by other people's perception of me, um, and perception of my gender identity, because I know it's, you know, I think every person has their own unique gender and experience of gender, and that's just true because everyone grows up with different circumstances, and different societies and in different families and different social circles, and so everyone's gender is put on, and or I don't want to say put on, but it's not simple as like putting on or taking off a hat, but um, I think there's as many genders as there are people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that even lots of drag performers are still kind of stuck in this binary of like, there's men and there's women, and you know, there's definitely more. There's
Mm-hmm.
more.
I really identify with a lot of you saying I'm trans and trying to figure out what that looks like and where that lands. And I just really relate with a lot of that, what you said. Do you, what's the difference between drag and like a non-drag gender representation for you, if any? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I think about all the time, um, and I don't think I have an answer for you, but I think for me, um, I have to remind myself that even if I'm dressed like this, I'm not a woman, and even if I'm dressed like with none of this on, I'm not a man. And
Mhm.
it's for me, it's like, I don't know, there's that Prince lyric, I'm not a woman, I'm not a man, I'm something that you'll never understand. And finding acceptance in that some people might not ever understand that. I think for me, like, yeah, it's sometimes nice to put on an earring or to paint my nails, but I know when I go outside my house, for better or worse, people do treat me differently if I'm dressed in a non-normative way or presenting even like just a little glitter on the eye, you know, like,
Mhm.
uh, as I'm sure you know. And as someone who goes out presenting femme, um, in a body that's sort of red or assumed to be male,
Mhm.
even in San Francisco, it is challenging. But I guess too, this kind of goes back to with Golden Hour. The one of the reasons I uh, did the show and continue to do the show, and this I guess more applies for after Shelter in Place. But it was really important for me to do drag in spaces where people would not be expecting to see a drag show, and I think um, that is part of my spirituality. That's part of activism, just like being visibly queer in public and like queer people gathering in public in a space that is not specifically designated for queer people. And like, obviously we had to look out for each other, and definitely we have had moments in the past where, you know, people were not really accepting or like pulling their kids away. But I think in San Francisco, there's actually been um, more acceptance of the general public. Like, wow, that's really cool. Like, I wasn't expecting to see drag this day. And here we are at the beach and there's drag happening.
Right. Awesome. And so another question is, what has been the most reward? It says, what has been the most rewarding experience? I guess in drag, or maybe even out of drag.
Yeah, I mean, what I just said, like there was one show we did at Alamo Square, and I was doing my last number of the night, and at that show I think I did 3 numbers, and I think I was doing "Don't Rain on My Parade," which is like one of the classic like drag staples, and we did an installation where we just had a bunch of chalk and people could just like draw out in the center of the park. There was this little child with their parent just like walking past, and they stopped, and like so the parent stopped too, and they just like were transfixed by the number, and I could like see the joy and excitement and like curiosity and like confusion too, like in this child's face. And like that was, I mean, that happened over a year ago, and that has been the most rewarding thing for me to like know that my drag is affecting people who again would not typically get to see drag. I think for me, if I had known what drag was from an earlier age, I would have started doing it earlier. But and I'm grateful for the best time for me to have done it would have been when I was a kid, and the second best time was when I was 25 or 26 when I began.
Right. I guess it's kind of like, it makes me think of like doing drag in the light, like not necessarily having to do it like in the dark or behind closed doors or in a specific space.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me that's a huge part of it, is like not having, again, I love specifically queer spaces as spaces for queer people to gather, but I love like sometimes I'll walk to again, this is before Shelter in Place, but I would sometimes walk from my house to the Stud for a gig, like in full drag, or maybe not full body, but like full face and hair,
Right.
and just kind of to take up that space as a queer person is really important. I think I had another point that I was going to say about that. But yeah, golden hour happens usually at sunset, but sometimes it would be at sunrise. And when we do it at sunset, we do start during the daylight, and then it goes into the night. And so there is this really lovely transition over the course of that hour. And then in the sunrise shows, which we only got to do about 2 of them before, because I couldn't do them as often because it's a challenge for me to wake up that early. Like, I would be waking up at 3 a.m. to paint. But there's a reverse that happens with the sunrise show where it starts and it's really dark and probably foggy, and then as the show progresses it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And then that's been a really great way to start the day. And I think Hennessy Williams, who was on this series as well several weeks ago, did the first sunrise show, and it's just, we did it at the top of Twin Peaks, and it was really foggy on one side of Twin Peaks, and then the East Bay side it was a little bit more just glowing orange sky. I almost sent you that number. But yeah, I think
so in the virtual space are you performing live and people watching virtual, or is it pre-recorded? Or
it's a mix of both. Sometimes it'll be pre-recorded, and sometimes I'll perform live. Usually, I mean, at least for all the golden hours we've done so far, it's been the pre-recorded numbers that the other performers send me, and then sometimes I'll perform live at the show as I'm hosting. I'm still working on getting to a place where we can all be performing live from our living rooms. But it is also nice to, like in the number that was shown at the beginning of this, it's fun to be able to like edit it and like add different elements. So I appreciate both.
Both ways, yeah. What would you I guess, what do you hope for the next generation to learn about the art of drag?
Ooh, I mean, I think they're already starting to learn this, is that like drag does not have to be excuse me, a binary thing. It's something that I particularly love. I mean, these gloves, I wear these all the time. You saw me wear these in this number. I'm really inspired by like creaturely drag. and more animal inspired drag or nature inspired drag than solely, you know, impersonating a woman or impersonating a man.
Mhm.
More embodying the spirit of whichever song I'm going to be performing. um, I think that's something again, I've already seen this in younger people who are doing drag, just kind of really breaking out of this gender binary box.
Right. And just kind of including all kind of creation within that dynamic, as far as whether it's creature or plant or human or even
Yeah,
alien.
yeah, I definitely. I mean, lots of my drag has been really alien. Like you saw the promo image I sent for this show. It was like me green with like a big wig. I used to be a bald queen, and I would do looks where I would just paint my whole head green and then, like, you know, highlight it with like really shiny glitter. I love the interdimensional aspect of drag with you know, again, moving from a 2D medium into a 3D medium, and then adding time so that becomes a 4D medium. I think it's really it's really helpful to have like all these different tools with drag, and to like be able to kind of push the envelope of like what drag is or what it could be. And again, these things are all expanding, and they're all growing with time, and as you know, drag performers are embracing technology, um, and yeah, like green screens and stuff. Like there's a lot for the future of drag that it really excites me. And
Mhm.
again, I think too, with all this whole shelter in place thing, most drag performers were in a better place than other entertainers to, because they knew how to do their own makeup, whereas like lots of, you know, pop musicians did not before shelter in place, um, or you know, to do hair and to do costuming and all that. So
Mhm.
yeah.
How was it a process? I when I first started, I was a bearded queen, and I know when I decided to get to the rid of the beard, it was a big thing. How was going from not being a bald queen to, like, how was that for you?
Oh, I mean, this has all happened in shelter in place. Um, I just wanted to experiment. Well, I wanted to experiment more with wigs during this time, which I have been. I've been like learning how to style my own hair, and do different things that I wasn't able to before. Again, one of the things about shelter in place that is a blessing is the, you know, amount of time to create things, and I'm really grateful for that aspect of it. Obviously, you know, we're going through a pandemic, so it is a challenging time for lots of reasons, but um, that for me is something I'm really grateful for.
Mhm.
Um, as far as being a bald queen, I just wanted to have hair again. I I used to have hair about this length with my natural hair, and I'm growing it out again, and I want to make a wig out of
Uh,
my own hair over many years, and so that's the goal mostly for that. Um,
Fantastic.
being bald, if you have never shaved your head, anyone who's watching out there, and you're on the fence about it, like, do it. It feels so nice. Like I would shave it with a razor, and you
Mhm.
can feel the sun on. There's nerve endings all over your head that you don't have any access to when you have even just a little bit of hair. But if you shave it down, you can feel the
Mhm.
wind, the rain, the fog. It's really lovely. And I definitely will go back to being bald at some point after I've harvested enough hair for a wig.
Right. Great. One question from Elizabeth. She was asking, what does your spirituality look like for you now?
Yeah, so I mean, again, this is part of Golden Hour, but I've been drinking lots of tea, like way more than I did before shelter in place.
Hmm.
So sitting with a hot cup of tea and trying not to do anything but breathe, you know, meditating that way, that has been really helpful for me. I've also been drinking lavender tea, which just for me is really calming. It's I feel like I've worked with the spirit of the lavender plant. Like since I was really young, we had some growing up in front of my house, and so I would just always be. I was that kid who um, would be like grabbing different herbs from the garden and like grass and mud and like stirring it in a thing and being like potion, you know. So I'm
Right.
still doing that. Still doing that now. Lots of spiritual practices from when I was a kid. I still practice.
Hmm.
I do again, even though I'm not hosting sunset drag shows, I do try to watch the sunset or the sunrise as often as possible. That for me is a really great physical reminder of, I think I tend to think of, and most of us do, we tend to think of the world as flat, even though we know it's not. And whenever you're watching the sunrise or the sunset, you're literally watching the earth, rotate, and you're seeing where you are spatially with the sun. Um, and that for me always puts everything into perspective. Like if I've had a bad day, I can watch the sunset and think, okay, in the cosmic scale, like we're at this tiny fraction of the universe right here in our solar system, and even that is so huge. Our solar system is so huge. So that's part of my spiritual practice too, is watching the sunset, watching the sunrise. Again, I think it's the little things in life that are important, but like if you think about the clockwork, the geometry of it, like it's a pretty cool thing that we get to be on this planet at all. you
Right.
know in the scope of things, like if the sun was a little closer, a little further, there'd be no life on Earth. So yeah, the sun is a huge part, and then the moon too. For me, it's again, Golden Hour used to be a full moon show, and then once I switched to a weekly show, I realized I could pay more attention to the full moon in a different way, that wasn't honoring it with a drag show.
Right. What would you say to somebody who is maybe considering getting into drag?
Yeah. As far as makeup goes, watch every YouTube video you can. And again, this is a great time to learn anything online. Like again, I'm learning how to sew now online. There's so many tutorials on YouTube. As far as performing, like watch the performers that you enjoy, and like if they have pre-recorded numbers online, watch those numbers over and over again and like see what they're doing. Again, after shelter in place, like go watch the performers you enjoy in person, and like talk to them about their practice, but also just watch, like see how people carry themselves when they're performing. One of the things that you mentioned, which I really appreciate, is that like there's no one right way to do drag. Like you can do drag and just take pictures of yourself. You can do drag and just do videos of yourself. You can do drag and do live performance. You can do drag and host a cooking show. Like there's no limit to what drag is. So I think this is advice that I've heard many times before, but like find your lane, find what you're good at, find what inspires you, and do drag that way.
Right.
So for me, that's like being a nerd and going out into nature.
Right. And it can be really challenging to stay in your lane, because like as you get going, people want to tell you how to do this, how not to do that. And it can be really, I think it can be really helpful if you're open to it, but it also can be very challenging, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's stifling.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, listening to your own voice and your own intuition with anything is going to be the way to go. But with drag specifically, that's really important.
Yeah. And let's see, there's a question here. What advice do you have for a younger queen who is ashamed to talk about spirituality in fear that they'll be brushed off and not accepted by others?
Ooh, that's a difficult question, but thank you for asking that. In my own like spiritual journey, and again, I don't, whoever is asking this, I'm sure you're going through your own version of this, is that with drag, I've gotten a lot less concerned about what other people think of me. And I think that is common for lots of drag performers, is I have a better sense of like who I am deep down, even behind the facade, behind not only the makeup, but like behind my skin, behind everything. And I think it's more important to say what's on your mind than to self-censor yourself for fear of what other people might say, or to express yourself for more fear of what other people might say. I've learned this lesson many times, and I've learned it the hard way many times, of like anytime someone is going to brush off what you have to say, like they're not really worth you having them around in your life. And if you're a younger person and that's your family, that can be really challenging, because that's been my experience, or like your society or your religion or your school. Just know who you are. it takes all of us time to know and to remember who we are. But it's possible for all of us. And I'd say if you can express it to the people around you for fear of safety,
Mm-hmm.
express it, on the internet anonymously, or write it down in a journal, like find the community that you can, and express it to them. And again, if people don't understand you, that's fine. They don't have to be you. Only you have to be you, and only you get to be you. So, yeah, express it, say it, preach it. If people aren't interested, then that's fine. They're on their own path. They're on their own journey.
Right. It's like a whole nother layer because people have issues around drag. And then if you talk about spirituality, last year I was passing out flyers for drag and spirituality, and people were like, "Yay, drag!" And then I would say in spirituality, and they'd be like, it's interesting.
Well, lots of people, especially queer people, associate that with religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I did for a while too. Like I was, I don't want to say I like disconnected from spirit, but I was definitely not as spiritual in my like late teens, early 20s, because I was like, fuck religion, it's all bad. And like,
Right.
that's not, that's an oversimplification of all of it. And I think, especially with drag too, like lots of drag, most people only know in the context of a nightclub at 10:30 or midnight, or in a bar. And now that drag is in more places. Like before this shelter in place, like I started a show with a drag performer here in the Bay, named Eileen Kilometers, that was in a bookstore. And we were going to do it as a monthly show. And we only got to do one show before shelter in place began. But like, again, I think for me, it's been really empowering to see all these online drag shows, because there are so many people of all ages from all over the world who get to watch it. And one of the things I've been considering in the context of Golden Hour is that, doing shows at the beach was great, but also it was not physically accessible for lots of people.
Mm.
And with doing Golden Hour online, it's really physically accessible for people, because anyone, as long as they can get to a computer or a phone, they can watch the show. And even after I start doing Golden Hour again, in person, I am going to be doing some kind of online drag thing, because I think it is really important. And again, there's different ways to play with the mediums.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. That was something, the next question I was going to ask was, just for folks who do have questions, where we have about like 7 minutes or so left. So if you do have some questions you want to ask, now is a good time to put them in there.
Cool. So, do like rapid fire questions too.
For sure, yeah. Where do you see yourself? Where do you see Syzygy in the future?
I mean, hopefully still doing drag. Like once I started doing drag, I knew I wanted to keep doing it for the rest of my life. So hopefully when I'm like 70 years old, I'll still be able to like get myself to the beach and like serve some rosemary tea and serve a look, excuse me, and perform. That's really what I wanted. My goal with drag, with Golden Hour specifically, but also with drag, is just to bring drag to more places. Obviously, Shelter in Place has kind of, in one sense, hampered that, but in the other sense, really expanded that. Like I did a Golden Hour several months ago that had people from all around the world in it, and that was something that was not possible before Shelter in Place. So, yeah, doing drag in physical spaces, again, once it's safe to do so, that are not bars, that are not nightclubs. That's my hope, is just to keep bringing drag. One of my goals with Golden Hour specifically is to do a full like 24-hour drag show where it's at sunset in each part of the world, as the sun is setting around the world, to like create a full day. And that's something that, it might be several years from now. We might need boats and barges, and that's more like 20 years from now, but that's part of future plans for Syzygy.
Yeah, that's all sounds fantastic. So it does look like we did get like a handful of questions real quick. So
let's do it.
We can do some rapid fire.
Okay.
Who are some of your favorite queens, but who are your favorite, some of your favorite drag artists in San Francisco or the Bay Area?
There's so many. I really love Kai Kai B. Michaels. There's someone who comes to Golden Hour a lot, and they did the first Golden Hour.
Mhm.
Um, I really love Hota Mercury, who's an amazing drag king who I got to meet through the stud earlier this year. Um, Again, Mary Weiss was the person who like I first saw doing drag, and I was like, oh, I want to do that. So Mary Weiss, Nikki Jizz, who's one of my drag moms, is like amazing artist and activist, and just one of the most entertaining people. She's also a San Francisco legend in my eyes. Um, I have two other moms who I enjoy. Rakam Sakura is one, and I just really admire her like positive attitude in drag, and just like overwhelming
Joy.
love and joy. Yeah, she's a really like upbeat, joyful person, which I think is a really different way of looking at drag.
Mhm.
And then my third mom is Florida Man, who is kind of stepped away from drag recently, but I really just appreciate the um, really bizarreness of their work too. And there's so many others. If you look at any of the lineups for Golden Hour, it's a list of drag artists I admire. And oh, Lisa Frankenstein is my absolute favorite drag queen. Please go follow her on Twitch and Instagram and Facebook if you're not doing that already. She has a monthly show or a weekly show online, and that kept me up till like 2 a.m. last night. So,
Oh, fantastic. What colors do you wear the most?
ooh, I wear a lot of black, just because that's what most of my clothes are. I'm trying to wear more rainbowy patterns. Um, Blue and orange are like my two favorite colors together. So like this bed sheet is a bed sheet that I found like
Mhm.
serendipitously, and I loved wearing those. Yeah.
Fantastic. Would you say glitter or sparkle?
Glitter. Sparkle to me is more of the verb, and glitter is the noun.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then what bars do you feel are um, are exclusive to all? Maybe it's inclusive.
Inclusive. As again, the stud is like where I not where I started doing drag, but that's the place where I felt most comfortable
Mhm.
performing as someone who didn't drink and doesn't drink. Again, it's sad that the stud has closed and like is looking for a new home. But again, like they wouldn't be able to be open now anyway, so it's bittersweet, but it's not. It doesn't feel like it's the end of the world. And it there is, if you are watching this now and you are able to donate to the stud, please do. Really, the stud was the only place I felt, and that's again why I started all these shows. I started a third show in the chapel. I didn't talk about this. Speaking of drag and spirituality, like I was doing a drag show in the chapel of this former nunnery,
Oh,
um, and that was
fantastic.
all spiritual.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And one, yeah, the thing about the stud, and I think you mentioned it earlier, was that they actually had drinks that were not non-alcoholic that were worthwhile. I don't drink either, so I really preferred going there as well because otherwise at a bar they'll say, "Oh, we have Diet Coke or
Soda
Sprite
water, yeah.
or juice, maybe."
Well, and I was one of my roommates I had a conversation with about this, but like, spirits are spiritual things. You know that there's a reason that the alcohols are called spirits. They have energies of their own, and so if again, if you're going to be drinking, please just do it responsibly. Know that there's there's an energetic exchange happening there between you and the spirit of that beverage.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, for yeah, I love that interest thinking about that as well because I feel like sometimes for me, because I do feel like my drinking and using was related to a spiritual like
Mhm.
loss, and so I was consuming spirit. I was consuming stuff that gave me life because for a long time, drugs and alcohol they gave me life and they gave me like I could live like I could never live without it. Eventually, it doesn't work like that, but like for a long time, it was kind of I think my substitute. And I'm not saying that that's for everyone, but I know for me that was the experience I had. And as soon as I was able to get rid of the drugs and the alcohol, I then was able to kind of like have space for spirituality.
Yeah, it lifts your spirits too.
Definitely. And that's why I feel like drag queens are like we're spiritual leaders in some ways because we lift people's spirits, we give them life, like whether it's joy, whether we're active, whether it's activism, whether we're raising money to take care of folks. Like I think that's what church is all about.
Yeah, I was gonna say this earlier, but that is something where, like, again, growing up within the church, that was the aspect that I thought was the most transformative like you said, raising funds for people in need, giving, and literally with the show I would host at the beach, like we'd have a hat, like a Liza Minnelli kind of bowler hat, and we would pass the hat around, and that was just like what we did at church with the basket for collecting tips,
Mhm.
for collecting donations. And so I think what you said is really important, and that it is crucial to have a redistribution of resources, of wealth, um, of energy and exchange of energy in a drag show. Like, I think if it's all about um, becoming a famous drag performer, then I think you're missing the point. I think, like you said, drag performers are the chaplains, or the priests, or the priestesses, or the stewards of their community, the spiritual stewards of the community.
For sure. And just really real quick, because we are out of time. What era do you love the most?
Ooh, what era? I
Mhm.
mean, I have a soft spot for the 90s. It's like when I grew I was a child in the 90s. And again, like, um, yeah, the 90s, the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, like that visual aesthetic really speaks to me, color-wise
Right.
specifically.
Would you say Mac or Krylon?
I've never used the Mac stuff, so I gotta say Krylon. I use that for my foundation because had my stubble.
Fantastic. Well, those are all the questions that we have tonight. I want to, is there anything else you wanted to say before we said goodbye?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for having these discussions. I hope that you do another version of this in the future. I'd love to see that again.
Yeah,
Um,
my
okay.
goal is to do, I want to do 50, I want to do all 50 states. I want to do at least
Oh,
three people in each state.
cool. Yeah, I guess I could say this too now. I talked to you before about Lisa. Lisa has talked a lot about spirituality on her Twitch show. There's
Yeah,
also a drag performer who I met in the Bay who now lives in Mexico City, whose drag name is Heaven on Earth. And that might be someone who you might want to bring or invite for the next show. Not only for their name, but they have a very spiritual approach to life and to drag.
fantastic. I will definitely do that. So thanks again for being in the show, and for being here tonight and sharing your narrative. For folks, also on Sunday, we have our main event, and Syzygy is part of that as well. So be sure to come and check that out on Sunday. It's at 3:33 p.m. To 4:44 p.m. And that's on Glide's Facebook. We'll also have it on YouTube Live, and then YouTube Live. And then we'll also have a Zoom link. And then we do have one final interview that will take place this Friday. Will be at this Friday. It will be Sister Mary Peter, again at 7:11, and that'll close out our 12 interviews. So thanks so much for joining us tonight, both Syzygy and the audience, and take care, and we'll see you around. Bye-bye.